Blessings one and all, and welcome to The Message. This episode certainly has a message for each and every one of us, and it is a call to examine ourselves, to really take an honest look at ourselves, the way we think, the way we behave, how we view others, how we treat others, and even our belief and connection to God. The world really isn't in a good place right now, and it's very easy at this time in history to point fingers at everybody else and say they're wrong, they're deluded, they're deceived, they're under this spell of stupidity and ignorance. But it's very hard to turn that mirror around and look at ourselves and realize that many times we're under that same spell of ignorance, stupidity, delusion, and deception. Now, the color of the delusion and the deception might be a little bit different, but it's still very much the same delusion and deception that everybody else is under. Now, what do I mean by all of this? Let's dig into this subject and see if by the end it doesn't make some kind of sense to us, because this is really something that I think is of monumental importance for all of us to hear and think about right now. And I mean every man, woman, and child in the world, we need to really be thinking about this. So I want to start out by reading a couple of verses from the Quran. And I want to start with Surah 6, verse 116. And it reads, "And if you obey most of those in the earth, they will lead you astray from God's way. They follow but conjecture, and they only lie." Now I want to go to Surah 10, verse 36, which reads, "And most of them do not follow anything but conjecture. Surely conjecture will not avail aught against the truth. Surely God is cognizant of what they do." There are a lot of verses in the Quran that talk about following conjecture and speaking about God things that we don't know, things that are not true, things that we've come up with in our own minds, things that we have really no possible way of knowing about God or the hereafter. And so the Quran speaks often of conjecture, those who follow conjecture, and other people will follow it with them. Things that are not so, that are spoken about God. And I think a classic example of that that's in the news right now here in the United States is by this couple from, I believe they're originally from Arizona. I could be wrong about that, but there's a gentleman by the name of Chad Daybell and his wife, Lori Vallow. Now, if you're outside of the United States and you don't know who these people are, Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow have a lot of controversy surrounding them. They were both married to other people, and their spouses strangely ended up dying, and then these two got together. I believe it was Chad who got quite a bit of money from his former spouse's life insurance policy. And these people have been traveling around the United States going to Hawaii, basically to hide out because they had 2 young children, and nobody has seen the children since September of 2019. The media has covered this. The police have questioned these people. The media has tried to interview these people and say, "Where are your children?" They won't answer. They had a court order about a month ago to produce the children, or you're going to, face some consequences. They had a deadline. They didn't produce the children. To this date, we don't know where these 2 young children are, whether they're dead, whether they're alive, whether they're being held somewhere against their will. But the really disturbing thing about Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow is their spiritual beliefs. Now, Chad Daybell has written several books. He said that he had 2 near-death experiences in his life. He saw the other side. He saw heaven. And he has this deep connection with God since his near-death experiences. He claims to be a very spiritual, very religious man. And I believe that Lori Vallow had read some of his books prior to them getting together. And reports say that she had become obsessed with near-death experiences. And she told her former husband, who is now dead, that she had a purpose on this earth to assemble the 144,000 chosen people of God from the earth that are spoken of in the book of Revelation in the Bible. She said very peculiar things like she was a god, that she had incarnated on various planets, and now she was here. She had this grand mission to bring together the 144,000. And allegedly, she told her husband, who is now, passed away, that if he tried to stop her from her mission, that she would kill him. And now this gentleman is dead. So we have these 2 individuals who claim to be very spiritual, doing the work of God, believe they have some kind of mission on the earth from God, but their lives are surrounded in suspicious deaths on both sides, both Chad and Lori. I believe the 2 children were Lori's. They were Chad's stepchildren, I believe. But 2 young children who disappeared. They lied about where the children were. They were last seen September 2019. No one knows if they're dead or alive. People that know Chad and Lori said that they belong to a religious cult, and some said that this cult was very dangerous, and that people in this cult end up dead. They drop like flies. So here you have these 2 people, and one of them who said that he had 2 near-death experiences. He saw the other side. He's so in, contact. He has this great connection with God. And there's all this controversy and death and dishonesty that even when the law comes and says, hey, where are your children? They've been missing. You lied about where they were. Where are your children? They will not give an answer. Lori is currently in jail. She's been arrested. She's being shipped back to her hometown, I believe it is, to stand trial. She has like $5 million bail, which no one can afford. Chad is now out there saying the children are safe, the children are okay, but he won't say anything more than that. Are they okay because they're being held somewhere by this cult? Is he completely insane and he's saying they're okay because they're with God, because they killed these two children? It's a very peculiar story, and I myself, as a spiritual person, find it very disturbing how two people who claim to be very religious, very spiritual, love God, had a near-death experience, saw the other side, and this is how you act. This is the fruits of your labor, and you think this is okay. But see, folks, this is where the story of Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow tie into the moral of the story in this podcast. Is that you see a lot of people, individuals, even religious institutions and groups and sects, who do just what we read about in the Quran at the beginning of this episode, and that is follow conjecture. Come up with these wild ideas about God and the afterlife and what the meaning of life is, or maybe we read it in a book somewhere and we just run with it. And we start getting obsessive and we start having these very erratic and compulsive behaviors, even to the detriment of other people and other people's lives. And we see this not only in the area of religion, but also in politics, in society by and large. Anybody who's done any kind of real in-depth study on society and the system that we currently live in and under, they tell us that it has a very cultic kind of overtone. We have the leaders. We're told how to behave, how to vote, how to believe, how to act, how to dress, what to buy, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. And people follow the beat of that drum. They vote for who other people tell them to vote in an election. They buy what other people tell them is popular and good to buy. Perfect example is the iPhone. People will spend thousands of dollars on a brand new iPhone, and just in a short period of time, a brand new one will come out. And they will have to trash the old one and go out and spend thousands of dollars to get the new one, because that's what they're told they should do. They have to have the latest model. It's popular. It's cool. Oh, look at me. I have the new iPhone. So there's very cultic overtones in much of our society. And we're seeing now, particularly in the United States and other parts of the world too, the danger that following conjecture, following that lead of other people, what other people tell us is right. We see how dangerous that can be in religion and spirituality. We need not look any further than Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow to see that. And most of us could probably come up with 101 other examples of religion gone horribly wrong because people followed some notion or conjecture that they read in a book or heard from someone else, or some crazy conclusion that they came to. But now we see the havoc that this is wreaking on society with the politics in the United States. Everyone's divided, and no one can see the problems in their own party. They're so busy on social media posting about this political party and that political party. But even if you tell them, or someone tells them, hey, none of these political parties are perfect, look at what the people in your party are doing, they can't see it. And they'll argue, and they'll swear, and they'll curse, and they'll name call, and they'll insult, because they cannot see. They're under that cultic mindset that the group that they belong to is the right group. Kind of like a lot of religious people, when I was in Christianity, my church denomination is the right denomination. All the rest are wrong. And even if you pointed out things that were wrong, that were skewed, that were even contrary to the scriptures, they would do the same things. They couldn't see it. They would curse, they would swear, they would get mad, they would insult, they would overtalk you, anything so they didn't have to hear what you were saying and face the facts that you were trying to present them with. I have known and still know many people in Christianity who say, well, I don't go to church anymore. I don't follow these organized religions and television personalities and, the big ministries. I just read the Bible and, I pray to God and, and Jesus and, I follow, I just follow the scripture and what's in my own heart. But yet when you hear these people talk, they're carting around an enormous amount of baggage and beliefs and doctrines from those organizations, from those big television ministries, from those big, Christian authors that are the best sellers. So they haven't purged any of that stuff. They're still following the conjecture. A perfect example that I saw of this just the other day on my YouTube channel before I started podcasting. I did a video, and it was in October, probably maybe about 3 years ago. And I talked about this thing, this topic that comes up every year around August, September, October, November, December, the time when people celebrate certain holidays, whether they be, Halloween or Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter. And you see a lot of Christians come out of the woodwork by then, around that time of year, and start saying how the holidays are evil and pagan and, you shouldn't celebrate them. You're playing into the devil's hands and all this sort of thing. And I actually did a video kind of debunking this because you'll hear things like I heard one person say on YouTube, on his channel, that if you have a Christmas tree and you bend over to get a gift and give it to your loved one, you're inadvertently bowing to some pagan tree god of the pine, and it's displeasing to God. And there's all sorts of things like that. So I really took some verses from the very Bible that they read, and, put them out there and said, just that. A lot of this is conjecture. It's stuff we're coming up with to make something more devious than it needs to be. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't some bad practices and all of those holidays that stem from the past, and even some people today practice, but not all of them. Some people just celebrate them as a holiday. It's a break from the norm, a break from the 9 to 5 work a day life. They're going to have an autumn harvest party with their families, or celebrate Christmas or Thanksgiving. They're some of them bring their religion into it. They're thankful to God. Others, it's just a holiday for the family. For most people in America, that's really what it has become. So I tried to point this out, that a lot of this was superstition and conjecture, and the holidays are no more evil than a handgun. It's the person using the handgun that makes the thing evil. So if you're going to bring, spurious practices, or even like Christmas time, bringing all of the greed. It's always about greed and stuff and how much stuff. And, again, getting that new iPhone or that new whatever. Yeah, that can be a practice that might not necessarily be good for us. But most people aren't celebrating the holidays because, they're worshiping devils and demons, not even inadvertently. And I made the point in this video that, worship is an act of the heart and an act of the will. You can't inadvertently worship anything. If your allegiance is to God, you can't be picking up a gift from underneath a Christmas tree and inadvertently worshiping and giving praise and homage and glory to, some pagan god of the green pine that you don't even know about. So I tried to make these points and many more, and I talked about in that video where a lot of these ideas came from about the holidays being, just evil. And it was from a gentleman by the name of Jack Chick, and he wrote a number of pamphlets and booklets and books. And, then there was, Jack Chick Publications. And, it was a very anti-Catholic, publishing company. The word escaped me there for a minute. Jack Chick was very anti-Catholic. And so anything that evolved, around, Catholicism was absolutely of the devil. And, he kind of went over the falls in a barrel with some of the things that he would say, and some of it has been proven to be wrong. His history, his beliefs, the things that he put forth. But nonetheless, someone just recently saw that video, and they wrote to me in big capital letters in the comments, "Jack Chick was a wonderful man of God. Don't you dare speak against him." So I wrote back and said, well, this video isn't necessarily about Jack Chick. It's where a lot of this person also wrote, everyone knows that the holidays are evil. And I said, take the glasses off and go back and listen to the video. Just because you like somebody and like what they say, you like a lot of the things that they might write about in a book, doesn't mean they're necessarily right. Maybe he was a great man of God doing his very best, but that doesn't mean everything he said was right or correct or even spiritually healthy. So take the teacher colored glasses off and listen to the podcast with an open mind and see if it's not reasonable. Because again, this person listening to the podcast couldn't get past, once I mentioned the name of somebody that they looked up to, they heard nothing else. And see, that's a danger in following conjecture as well, is that we start setting these preachers and teachers and even imams up as almost Moses figures or Christ figures or Muhammad figures in our lives. And if these people are giving us wrong information, then our whole concept of faith, of God, of what all of this is about, being given this gift of life, is unbalanced, is wrong. But see, folks, that's something I talk about a lot in my other show, is people looking for leaders, always looking for somebody to follow, looking for somebody to tell them what to believe, what to do, how to do it, what is right, what is wrong. And how dangerous that becomes. Because most of these people, yes, they are following conjecture. They're taking verses out of the Bible or other books and giving them way far-reaching definitions that start getting away from the simple fact or the simple truth that those verses originally taught. And that's when we start getting off into fanaticism, erratic behaviors, peculiar notions, superstition. And I want to bring our attention, before we end this podcast, back to Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow. How easy it is for us to look at them and say, these people are nuts. These people are in a cult. These people have a cultic mentality. They're dangerous. They're erratic. What are they thinking? And they are. All of those things, sadly, are true. But then, as I said in the beginning of this podcast, we have to turn that mirror around and look at ourselves. Because how much are we, each and every one of us, doing the same thing? Following our favorite preacher, teacher, pastor, priest, imam, guru. Following all the conjecture, all the superstition that they can feed us. And we never get out of our own way to ask ourselves, is this reasonable? Is this true? Is this right? Because there's a lot of dangerous spiritual sects and thoughts out there, and people just follow it. And the same goes for society, the rules of society in general, and politics. We can never look at it and say, is this right? Am I really being reasonable and logical about this? Am I really taking in all the facts and being a critical thinker and seeing the story from both sides? Or am I willfully blinding myself because I can't possibly entertain the thought that I was wrong, these people are wrong, that politician is wrong, that political party is wrong, that author is wrong, that pastor, that priest, that preacher, that imam, that guru was wrong? Because that's just crumbling to the ego. And then we tell ourselves, well, I feel lost. I've put my whole life into this belief system or this person or their teachings or this group or this denomination or this political party or this way of life, whatever it is. But you heard my story in the very first episode of this podcast. If you haven't heard it, go back in the queue and listen to the calm before the storm. My story where I was in Christianity all of my life. Introduced to it from a very early age. It was all I knew. And in between the years of 1999 and 2000, I walked away from it. And it was one of the hardest things I ever did. Did I feel lost? Yes. Did I feel confused? Yes. Did I literally have anxiety and panic attacks that were crippling? Because the foundation I had based my life on for so many years was ripped out from underneath me? Absolutely resounding yes. That was one of the hardest things that I ever did and one of the most difficult times that I ever went through. But I'm here to tell you, I made it through. And I'm happier for it. I'm better for it. I have more peace. My spiritual life feels a lot more, much more stable and real and connected and happy. Change isn't easy. But most of the time, it's absolutely what we need. And it's worth going through a hard time, an extremely hard time, to break away from the conjecture, the cultic mentality that this world puts us in. Because there's freedom on the other side. The Quran tells us to follow none but God, and to not set up partners or equals with Him. And that means other gods, other beings as gods, people, idols, things that we might idolize or follow in this world. It says there is no God but God, and God is one. And you follow only Him. And I think we can see the absolute wisdom in that saying and in those verses when we have the courage to look at the world around us, the courage to look at people like Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow, and then realize, as messed up as these people are, there's a lot of other people, most people, who are just as messed up, who are just as fanatical, who are just as lost, who are just as so steeped in their belief system. Whatever it is, religious, political, societal, even if it's wrong, they're so steeped in it, they can't even see their way out. And it's then when we see that so clearly that we realize the wisdom of those words, follow God alone. Follow none but God. And do not set up equals or partners with Him. Because, folks, this is what happens to people. This is what happens to religion. This is what happens to society when we follow people, when we follow other than God, when we start following conjecture, what they say they know about God, or that they died and went to the other side, and so they have this inside information, and we should listen to them because they now have a mission. You know, we don't realize that so many of these people, just like the televangelists and many of the churches and organized religions out there, they're there to make money. They're there to get followers. From the pastor to the priest to the guru, I mean, all these people. They're not necessarily out there for the good of humanity. They're out there for the good of making a profit on what they can sell, what they can teach, who they can hook. Now, I'm not saying there aren't honest authors and people out there, because there are, but still, we can take their information if it is correct, if it has truth. But that doesn't mean we have to set that information or that person up as an equal to God or a partner to God, like they are God-like in this world or in our lives. You know, a lot of people in Christianity are always worried about the coming of the Antichrist. But what is the Antichrist? The Antichrist means instead of. Something you're putting in place of God, of Christ. How many antichrists, how many anti-gods are so many of us following in this world? This is why we need to turn that mirror around and look at ourselves. What are we purposefully blinding ourselves to? What are we refusing to hear? What conjecture are we following so strongly and so blindly that we couldn't see the light of God if it shone on the path in front of us? Follow none but God, and don't set up equals or partners with Him. And certainly don't follow conjecture. It might be a scary thought to think or a scary question to ask. But I think we should all look in the mirror and say, how much am I like Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow? Maybe I'm not harming children. Maybe I'm not harming anybody, putting anybody's life at risk or anything of that nature. But in my belief system, in the way I act, in my fanaticism, and holding so tightly to these things, these conjectures, these cultic mentalities and overtones that guide us in our daily lives, how much am I holding on to these things? As much as these people held on to the teachings of their very dangerous and fanatical cult, we might be surprised. We might be very surprised how similar our thought patterns and our behaviors are to those kinds of people. That's a scary thought, I know. Very troubling. But I think it's something that each and every one of us in this day and age need to really take a hard, long look at. And it's never too late to throw it all off and just follow none but God. Because I'll tell you, ladies and gentlemen, freedom is a beautiful thing. And I hope each and every one of you listening to this podcast will find that freedom and that peace of mind and soul that it brings. I'm Paul James Caden. This is The Message. Thank you for listening, and God bless.